Fix your mess and make your mama proud. Pull up a chair, y'all. The porch light's on.
Picture this. It's midnight. A stranger's shadow moves at the edge of your yard, and your porch light flickers on. Suddenly, you see things as they really are. That's what we're doing here. No filters, no guesswork. Here is where we put safety first, sweet tea second, and never shy away from the tough truths. I'm your host, and tonight I'm promising you straight talk on safety, responsibility, and the boundaries that matter. Ever wonder why border security stirs up such heated debate? Is it really about fences and forms, or is it something deeper, a fundamental right to know who's coming into our community? We'll start with common sense boundaries, dive into the clash between enforcement and leniency, and finish with why shining a light on the tough issues isn't just brave, it's necessary. Think of this as a security system for your mindset. Buckle up. Tonight's journey will be as illuminating as a freshly changed porch light bulb and just as necessary. Let's get to it. Let's start where every good evening begins. Someone knocks, you check the peephole. Seems obvious, right? But for a nation, that peephole is called border control. It's not paranoia, it's prudence. Now you might be thinking, isn't that just common sense? But here's the catch. When we blur entry rules, we invite uncertainty and risk. Think of vetting as a firewall. Without it, any virus can sneak in. Critics say, but can't we be more welcoming? Of course. But being welcoming doesn't mean being reckless. Inclusivity and integrity aren't mutually exclusive. They're like sweet tea and ice, better together, but only if you get the balance right. So, are we protecting our home or just leaving the door cracked open for anyone who wanders by? That's the question we have to answer with clarity. Let me tell you, a porch light works best when it shines everywhere, not just in the corners we're comfortable seeing. Here's a thought. What good is a rule if nobody follows it? Imagine playing checkers where half the players move diagonally, the rest just jump wherever they please. Chaos, right? In legal terms, that's what happens when enforcement is weak. The principle of rule of law is like a referee. It keeps the game fair and everyone accountable. Ever heard someone say, the rules are just suggestions? Ask them how that flies next time they're pulled over. Selective enforcement isn't fairness, it's favoritism. So, if you're following the rules, you deserve to know they mean something. Otherwise, why bother? On this porch, the rules are clear: fairness for all, and no one's above the law. Let's tackle blurred boundaries. Imagine your garden if you don't mark the rows. Weeds and tomatoes fight for the same dirt. Soon, you can't tell crops from chaos. In policy, this looks like unclear definitions of legal and illegal. It's not just confusing, it's dangerous. Ambiguity is like fog on a winding road, one wrong turn, and you're in the ditch. Now, critics say strict enforcement is cold hearted. But let's flip the script. Who's really risking more? The one who demands order or the one who leaves the gate swinging in the storm? Policy roulette, betting on good intentions but ignoring consequences, can have real fallout. Think of it as playing poker with your family's well being at stake. You might wonder, isn't there a happy medium? Sure, but a compromise without standards is like sweet tea without sugar. All potential, no payoff. It's not about being rigid, it's about being reasonable. Compassion means little if it costs community safety. That's the tension protecting both hearts and homes. On this porch, We bet on both, but never at the expense of either. Enforcement isn't a dirty word, it's the muscle behind every fair system. Think of law enforcement as the porch railing, steady, reliable, always there to grab when things get wobbly. Let's talk consequences. When we ignore safety and rule of law, we're not just breaking abstract principles, we're hurting real people. Think of a porch light left off. What's lurking in the dark isn't just inconvenience, it's danger. Border security and community trust are like a tandem bicycle. If one pedal stops, the whole system wobbles. Someone might say, aren't isolated incidents just that isolated? But repeated failures add up, like loose nails in your floorboards. Eventually, someone gets hurt. So the real world impact, broken trust, fractured communities, opportunities lost for both newcomers and neighbors. The lesson, looking away is never neutral. It's a choice with consequences, plain and simple. Transparency. Now, there's a big word thrown around a lot, but what does it mean for our communities? Imagine if your porch light could talk, narrating every movement. That's what transparent policies should do. Shine a light, leave no room for shadows. Responsibility is that quiet companion at every doorstep. You can't outsource it and you can't run from it. If a nation ignores who enters, it's like leaving your house keys under the mat and hoping for the best. Let's raise a glass to the silent majority, the rule followers. They're the ones who double check locks, file their papers, and wave politely to the mailman. Their reward? A promise that the system respects their effort. When we downplay enforcement, it's like telling your best tomato grower their careful rows don't matter. That's not just disrespect, it's a breach of trust. You might say, but isn't flexibility important? Sure, but fairness means everyone gets the same playbook. Consistency and credibility are like bricks and mortar, one without the other, and the wall falls down. A community built on trust and fairness stands strong even when storms roll in. So let's celebrate those who play by the rules. They're not just following orders, they're upholding the very foundation of our porch. Truth isn't always polite. Sometimes it stomps through the garden and knocks over your best tomato cages. But you know what? We let the porch light shine anyway. Common sense gets a bad rap as if it's outdated or unsophisticated. But let's be real, what's more timeless than making decisions that protect your home and heart? Practical wisdom and risk assessment, think of them as your weather app and your rain boots. You check both so you don't step in a puddle unprepared. Isn't common sense subjective, you might wonder? Sure, but there are universal truths. Lock your doors, look before you leap, and never leave the porch light off out of stubbornness. Let's trust our instincts, sharpen our judgment, and pay attention to the signals. Those lessons have kept communities safe for generations. So, what have we really uncovered under our porch light tonight? First, a nation's right and duty to know who's walking through the gate. Second, the irreplaceable role of clear, enforced rules. And third, the courage to shine truth even when it's uncomfortable. Let's not forget, safety isn't optional, and neither is common sense. If you want to make a difference, here's your action step next time you hear a debate on these issues. Ask yourself, would I make that decision for my own porch? That's all for the Porchlight Patriot, where the tea is sweet, the takes are spicy, and Chicken Pimp keeps the porch light on so nobody trips over their own bad decisions. Don't forget to subscribe and keep your light burning bright. See y'all next time. Would you believe that numbers can fuel more arguments than they settle? Typically because the numbers don't lie, but people sure do. Today we've been tackling the wild, tangled mess of crime statistics and immigration policy. You'll hear the terms data integrity. Think of it as using a thermometer to measure a fever, and policy optics, like putting a filter on reality, Snapchat style. Now, why does it matter if the numbers say one thing but people feel another? By the end of this episode, you'll know how to separate the raw facts from the spin, why the law is so complicated, and how real life communities feel these policies every day. Here's the roadmap. First, we dig into what the numbers really show. Then, we tackle the legal maze of immigration. Finally, we'll zoom out to see how these debates play out on Main Street. Ready to get uncomfortable? Let's go. Because sometimes the facts are loud, but the stories people tell are louder. Let's find out why. Let me ask, have you ever heard someone say undocumented immigrants commit less crime than citizens? Or maybe the opposite? The data is like a box of puzzle pieces. You can create different pictures depending on which stats you use. Terms like incidence rate, the number of crimes per group, and data disaggregation, breaking numbers into smaller chunks, get tossed around like confetti. One study might show lower rates for some crimes, but another highlights spikes in other areas. Now you might be thinking, so which is it? That's the setup. The conflict comes when each side cherry picks what fits their narrative. But the resolution? We need to look at the full picture, not just the brightest colors. Whether it's violent crime or property crime, context is everything. Location, enforcement, and reporting matter. Don't let anyone sell you simplicity in a complex debate. It's not about denying facts, it's about questioning which facts matter most for the policies we choose. Let's cut through the noise. Entering a country without authorization is what the law calls a statutory offense. Think of it like running a red light. It doesn't matter why you did it, there's a clear rule. So, why do we have a legal pathway? Picture it as the velvet rope at a club. It's there to keep order, vet guests, and protect what's inside. When people skip that line, the whole system, what policy types call procedural fairness, gets thrown off. Now you might ask, isn't the process slow and unfair? Absolutely. But critics say the alternative, turning a blind eye, undermines both security and trust. The debate isn't just about borders, it's about the principle of equal rules for everyone. When that system breaks down, folks who followed the process feel cheated. So, is the law broken or just being bent out of shape by politics? That's our next stop. Imagine someone saying, even one crime by an undocumented immigrant is too many. It's a powerful argument, and it's rooted in the idea of preventable harm, the notion that things shouldn't happen if we can stop them. The technical terms here are zero tolerance, no exceptions, and risk mitigation, minimizing dangers wherever possible. Together, they shape a hard line in the sand. But let's pause. Does this standard apply everywhere? We don't close highways when accidents happen, but critics say immigration is different because entry itself broke the law first. Now imagine someone countering, but most undocumented immigrants are peaceful. That's the conflict. The resolution? Society has to decide where compassion meets caution. The one crime argument sticks because it tugs at our most basic need, safety. But is it fair or just emotionally persuasive? Here's a dilemma for you. Can a policy be good for one group yet risky for another? Welcome to the public safety versus opportunity paradox. Two big terms float around here. Sanctuary policy, meaning limits on local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, and community policing, a model that emphasizes trust. Supporters argue these policies make immigrants less afraid to report crimes. Critics respond, but what about dangerous offenders slipping through? Let me tell you a story. In some towns, community trust soared after sanctuary policies. In others, enforcement gaps led to repeat offenses. The results aren't black and white, they're a patchwork quilt. So, can we maximize safety and opportunity together, or is this always a trade off? That's the real debate. Now, the question that echoes across the political spectrum, are some policies putting public safety at risk? Let's break down two big ideas. Federal local cooperation, think of it as teamwork between two agencies and enforcement discretion the power to decide which rules to enforce strictly. Critics say that limiting cooperation can make it harder to find and remove dangerous individuals. Supporters say it protects vulnerable residents from unnecessary fear. Now, you might be thinking, why not just target the bad actors? Well, the system isn't that precise sometimes, lines blur. Ultimately, the critic's question lingers because it strikes at the heart of government's job, keeping people safe while balancing rights and responsibilities. Let's zoom in. Sanctuary policies. These are local rules that limit collaboration with federal immigration authorities. Think of it as putting up a fence between city and federal responsibilities. The technical term, jurisdictional autonomy, means cities can set their own rules, but enforcement loopholes, gaps in coordination, can let some individuals avoid scrutiny. Supporters say sanctuary protects families from overreach. Critics say it's a shield for repeat offenders. Now, imagine a mayor who says, we're safer when everyone feels welcome. Across town, a sheriff warns, but what about the wanted felons? The tension is real. The big question, can sanctuary exist without sacrificing safety? The answer isn't simple, and that's why the debate rages. What happens when enforcement agencies can't keep up? That's called a system overload. Imagine a funnel clogged with cases. Eventually, something spills over. Terms like case backlog, too many files, not enough hands, and interagency breakdown, poor communication are the technical roots of the problem. When that happens, communities feel it in real ways: overloaded services, stressed police, and crimes that slip under the radar. Now, you might ask, does this only affect immigration cases? Not at all. But immigration adds an extra twist. Federal, state, and local systems all have to work together. When enforcement breaks down, people notice and the trust in the system takes a hit. Let me tell you a story. A politician talks about compassion and fairness from the podium. A resident talks about a break in down the street. That's the messaging gap. Two crucial terms here: policy narrative, the story politicians tell, and lived reality, what people actually experience. When policies sound good on paper but don't hold up in practice, frustration blooms. People want safety and accountability, not just promises. You might be thinking, are leaders out of touch? Sometimes. And that's where the debate grows most heated between theory and practice. The challenge? Closing the gap so policy reflects what communities actually need, not just what sounds good at election time. Have you noticed how the same story can sound wildly different on two news channels? That's the media war at play. Technical terms like framing effect, how information is presented, and selective reporting, choosing which facts to highlight, turn statistics into emotional ammo. Now, you might say, aren't journalists supposed to be objective? In theory, yes. In practice, every outlet has its angle. When numbers become weapons and stories become slogans, it gets harder for ordinary folks to know what's real. So, next time you see a headline about crime or immigration, ask yourself, is this reporting or just storytelling with numbers? Policy isn't just paperwork, it touches lives. Let's get personal. What happens when enforcement slips or rules change overnight? Real people feel the impact. Terms like collateral consequences, unintended effects on bystanders, and community resilience, how neighborhoods bounce back matter here. Let me tell you about Maria, who lives in a sanctuary city. She feels safer reporting crimes, but her neighbor worries about increased gang activity. The same policy, two very different experiences. Now, you might wonder, is there a way to balance it all? The struggle isn't abstract, it's as close as your front door. Policies shape the world we live in, for better or worse. And that's why these debates are so personal and so heated. Picture this: you've waited years, spent thousands, and jumped through legal hoops to immigrate. Then someone else cuts the line and gets protected. Fair? Not for many. We call this queue jumping, skipping the legal process, and procedural justice, the idea that rules should apply equally. Critics argue that when the system rewards line cutting, it erodes trust and deters future compliance. Now, you might ask, isn't the system broken anyway? Maybe. But fairness is about more than just outcomes, it's about the process. This dilemma cuts deep, fueling frustration across communities and shaping the immigration debate for years to come. So, how do we fix the mess? Bridging the divide starts with policy reform, reworking the rules, and stakeholder engagement, getting everyone at the table. Imagine a town hall where critics, supporters, and officials actually listen. That's the dream and the challenge. Now, you may be thinking, can compromise really work? It's tough, but history shows progress happens when people move past slogans and dig into solutions. We need systems that protect both safety and opportunity, and processes that are fair and transparent. Bridging this gap is more marathon than sprint, but every step counts. Let's bring it home. What are the three takeaways? First, numbers offer insights but can't tell the whole story. Second, legal processes exist for a reason, even if they're flawed. Third, real life impacts matter more than talking points. So, what concrete step can you take? Next time you hear a stat or a story, dig deeper. Ask, who does this affect and what's the bigger picture? Now, imagine someone says, all immigrants are a threat, or no immigrant ever causes harm. Both extremes miss the truth, hiding in the middle what policy experts call nuanced analysis, seeing the shades of gray. Here's your call to action. Don't let slogans make your decisions. In next episode, we'll unpack how economic realities shape immigration policy and why the jobs debate is every bit as fiery. You ever seen a border policy so tangled it'd make a tumbleweed blush? Welcome to the Porchlight Patriot, y'all. I'm Chicken Pimp, your border watching back 40 correspondent. You thought your Second Amendment was getting chiseled away like a meth head loose in a museum with a chisel in hand while on a sugar high? Well, buckle up. If you think that was reckless, just wait till you hear about the latest immigration shenanigans. We're diving headfirst into the bureaucratic bullshit that's turning the state line into a three-ring circus. Ever wondered how cooperation breakdowns and sanctuary gambles land us in a bureaucratic goat pen? Let's unravel this mess one fence post at a time. I'll break down why compassion doesn't mean chaos, how messaging turns into a bureaucratic mudslide, and exactly what's at stake when politicians treat your community's future like a political football. Grab your boots. It's about to get muddy. Let's kick things off with the state's decision to stop cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. Now, who in their right mind thought letting the barn cat retire and trusting the mice was a good idea? That's the recipe for a rodent jamboree. See, cooperation agreement is the technical term for how local and federal folks share info and back each other up like a neighborhood watch, but with more paperwork. But when the state pulls out, it's like yanking the latch off your chicken coop and hoping the foxes have good intentions. You might ask, doesn't this make us safer? Well, only if you believe the raccoons are going to lock themselves out at night. Spoiler, they won't. Next up, sanctuary style proposals. Now, I'm not against a little compassion, but there's a big old difference between lending a hand and leaving the front gate swinging in the wind. Sanctuary policy, in theory, means local cops don't help with immigration enforcement, sort of like telling your farmhands, don't worry about the fence, the cows will stay put. Would they? Not unless they're the world's laziest cows. The idea sounds warm and fuzzy on a flyer, But in practice, it's a recipe for goats in the road and chickens roosting in your truck. Real world policy needs more than just hope and hashtags. Politicians love painting immigration as a fairy tale. We're building a welcoming community, protecting families. But behind the curtain, it's a paperwork avalanche, a bureaucratic mudslide. Ever been stuck on hold with the DMV? Now imagine that. But the paperwork's in 5 languages and twice as thick. That's systemic inefficiency for you, where the process feels like a maze rigged by pranksters. Now, you might ask, is it really that bad? Well, it's like filling out tax forms while riding a bucking bronco, confusing, exhausting, and you end up dizzy, not done. Here's what fries my chicken. The folks hollering about public safety are often the same ones making enforcement harder. Think about the term public safety. It should mean all entry points are guarded, like a good fence. But with these policies, you're locking the front door while every window in the house is wide open. You can't say you're protecting folks while you're tying the hands of those on the front line. It's like telling your guard dog to hush while tossing steaks over the fence. Makes you wonder how much of this is safety and how much is just wishful thinking in a sheriff's hat. Immigration isn't a game, but politicians treat it like a football nobody wants to actually score, they just want to punt. You've heard it. We're being humane versus we're being overrun. Both sides trade headlines like cattle at an auction, but nobody does the dirty work of fixing the corral. Why don't they just fix it? You might wonder. Because, my friend, it's easier to make noise than to mend a fence. Meanwhile, real folks' families, officers, everyday workers are left to sort out the mess while politicians rehearse their sound bites and pose for the cameras. Let's talk bureaucracy, because if you've never seen the immigration system up close, picture a goat pen run by the DMV, powered by dot matrix printers from 1997. The technical term here is administrative backlog, which just means the mountain of applications and permits is so high it needs a Sherpa. Ever tried getting a straight answer from a government office? Now multiply the confusion by 10 and shrink the staff by half. It's slow, messy, and nobody seems to know who's in charge. If you think the goats ever get out, you're right. They escape right through the paperwork holes. Let's not pretend politicians love a good border fence photo op. During campaign season, it's all, we must secure this. But after the election, suddenly, border security becomes complicated. That's hypocrisy, saying one thing for votes, then dodging in the mud when real work needs doing. You ever seen someone campaign like a ranch boss, then govern like they're scared of getting their boots dirty? It's not about slogans, it's about showing up after the camera crews leave and actually tightening the fence wire. That's the difference between leadership and lip service. Here's the truth under the porch light. Immigration is real people, real communities, and real consequences, not just a campaign accessory. The technical term here is human impact, meaning behind every policy, there's someone's life getting tossed around. But lawmakers treat the issue like it's chores they hope the next guy will do. You can't run a back 40 without fences, and you can't run a state without a working plan. So, next time you hear politicians debating policy like they're swapping pie recipes, remember, real folks are the ones eating what comes out of that oven. Let's tie it back to our last episode. Remember how we talked about the Second Amendment? Here's why it still matters. When government starts swinging at your rights with one hand, they're often fiddling with the front gate with the other. The technical term individual liberty isn't just theory. It's about having the means to protect your own when the system's too tangled to help. You might say, isn't that paranoid? Well, paranoia is just preparedness when the barn doors are swinging. The more government overreaches, the more you ought to know how to look after your own pack. State versus federal authority. Now, there's a phrase you hear during every policy scuffle. It's like two ranchers arguing over who owns the fence line. Jurisdiction is the fancy term here. It means who's got the right to make the rules and who has to follow them. When states decide to go their own way, the result is a patchwork quilt of policies, some with holes big enough for a coyote to stroll through. The confusion leaves locals and officers trying to follow two sets of rules at once. Now you might be thinking, can't they just work together? If only it were that simple. Let's talk money. Every policy shift comes with economic ripples someone's got to pay for broken fences, extra patrols, and all that red tape. The technical term fiscal impact just means the cost lands on taxpayers like an unexpected vet bill. When bureaucracy balloons, communities get squeezed, schools, hospitals, and local businesses all feel the pinch. Now, you might ask, doesn't more open policy save money? Not if you're footing the bill for every lost goat and runaway chicken. At the end of the day, policy without planning is just a recipe for busted budgets and empty feed sacks. Behind the headlines and hashtags, it's communities bearing the brunt. Social cohesion is the term experts toss around. It's what happens when neighbors know and trust each other. Fences are mended and everyone's working together. But political chaos breeds division, fear, resentment, and uncertainty. Ever seen a town meeting where folks are more interested in winning an argument than solving a problem? That's the fallout when policy ignores people. If you want real solutions, you've got to rebuild trust and start treating immigration like the human issue it is, not just a legislative football. So, what did we learn under the porch light today? First, cooperation breakdowns turn borders into chaos. Second, bureaucracy turns compassion into confusion. Third, politicians' football games leave real folks cleaning up the mess. Here's your action step. Next time you hear a policy pitch, ask how it affects your community on the ground, not just in headlines. Can you spot the difference between slogans and solutions? Next week, we'll crack open the ranch ledger and follow the money whose pockets fill up when policy goes sideways. Until then, keep your fences tight and your porch light burning. Share this show with a neighbor, and let's keep the conversation honest and maybe a little rowdy.
Yeah, flip that porch light on. Time to see what kind of mess we're dealing with today. As I'm sitting in my rocking chair, calling out the bullshit, watching all these headlines, acting like a fool again. Southborn, truly torn, fed up and fired. If the country's lost its mind, baby, I'm getting inspired. I'm the porch light